Titus Mung'ou is a regional nutritional advocate, and he's here with us in the studio. We'll soon be joined by Martha Nyagaya, who's a nutrition specialist. We want to talk about malnutrition as a crisis in Kenya and in the continent. Titus, good morning.
Good morning, Latif.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you.
How's your Tuesday morning?
Well, it's good, and I hope you had breakfast, because when you speak about nutrition, we need to know that you have had good breakfast.
What is good?
What is a good breakfast?
Did you have a balanced meal? Did you have a... Actually, when you say eat as a king in the morning, as you go down afternoon or lunch, lessen it, and then as a pauper in the evening.
Yeah, my mom used to say, eat breakfast like a king,
Yes.
lunch like a prince, and supper like a pauper.
Great. And that is what actually we talk at times in nutrition. But we go beyond just meals and eating, and that's what maybe we are going to discuss.
So nataka mtu akule ugali asubuhi
Na mboga.
Well,
na kanyama.
in some of our communities, yes, you
Na
can have
ugali
morning,
size mzuri.
You know, it is and desserts.
Alafu ukifika usiku ulale njaa.
Yes.
Aye.
but we discuss that because there are also other dangers that we have experienced, that we have people ugali, sukuma all along. And then you find that in most of our communities with vast land, people just eat kind of the same meal.
Yeah.
And at times they lease their land and end up suffering. And that's where you find some also malnutrition just owing to such kind of eating. Nonetheless, let's
Titus,
proceed.
I think let's begin with the definitions.
Yeah.
And you need to explain to us what nutrition is and then what malnutrition is. Because what we know for sure is that, for example, in the country, we have the National Food and Nutrition Policy, all right?
Yeah.
Security, food and nutrition security policy. When you talk about nutrition and malnutrition, what's the actual definition of these two terms?
Well, I would bring it from my advocate's point of view. Martha will come and bring in the technical as an expert, and what I can say also, one who is studied well nutrition. I would say this way, that let's differentiate that there is good nutrition, not just nutrition.
Okay.
In what he say in Swahili, sio bora chakula, chakula bora.
Okay.
So that when you have the right nutrients, quality is it food, and it goes beyond food, because when we talk of nutrition also, you running, if you have also to ensure that there is clean water this person is having and everything else that is around it in health, then you are addressing the person's nutrition. Come to it this way, that nutrition does not only begin at eating, because that person had the right background from birth, and this is why Nutrition International comes in to speak all along before a child is born, through all that, to ensure that that child is in the right state in nutrition. But malnutrition can be in two different ways. One of them is undernutrition. You find that a child can have, for example, is too short for the age of that child, is stunted, or acute malnutrition is experienced or notable in that child. In most of these cases, we can attribute them also to even the breastfeeding challenges. I don't know, and we need to ask, if you are married, your wife breastfeeds exclusively 6 months. Is that happening? Do we have even in our own policies kind of that in office here, where you have a breastfeeding corner or room, to ensure that we do not deny a child to be well breastfed? Then that child is not undernourished or affected. But then we also have what overweight, and at times it happens all the way to obesity, from even childhood all the way to the adults, and you find that, so there is over nutrition cases that we report. So we need to see malnutrition in different facets. But as we talk of a triple burden of malnutrition that is affecting the world, we are talking of all those things, whether there is stunting, we call it, and a child is acutely malnourished, there is wasting, you find also in the weight, and then you come also to now the overweight, all those kind of things. And Kenya is experiencing all those forms. Unfortunately, over 2 million of our children will not achieve their full potential to be who they would have been in life because of malnutrition.
Where are you seeing mostly, if we take a geographical imprint of the country, where are you seeing the most undernutrition is taking place in Kenya?
Well, again, this one, as we will come from also the technical part from Martha, you would find that their country has mapped the areas, and some of them are in the vulnerable regions or populations. For example, in arid and semi-arid areas in Kenya, we also experience that kind of undernutrition, and some of this can be explained because of access to food, quality food, and some of the challenges are attributed also to what you would see that in movement of populations and culture. Do you know that in some cultures, even just breastfeeding, and I have addressed this, some people don't even breastfeed using both kind of, when a mother is breastfeeding, will just sent on one of her breasts and not both. They believe the child will die if you breastfeed in both. And so there are culture areas which are not even disadvantaged economically, but the cultures are impeding and causing some of this undernutrition. And so that's why I also spoke about some are endowed economically with good crops, but the farmers and they have tilted towards a certain type of food. In Western, where I come from, ugali, if it is not on the table, then there was no food.
I still want to come back to that proper understanding of nutrition and malnutrition. All right, so in children, if a child has not been breastfed, blah 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 blah, then we'll talk about them getting malnourished, undernourished. They're not getting sufficient food, sufficient proper diet. But what exactly defines proper nutrition? Like you said, it's not bora chakula, it is chakula bora.
Yes.
So what is chakula bora? Is it about having a balanced diet? Is it about eating 3 meals a day? Is it about having food and then taking water? Is it about making sure that you're taking fruits? What is chakula bora?
And if you balance all these things, where does water come in?
Thank you. One thing which I said earlier is that we have to have the right nutrients in food, and that is the thing. That's why we come in as Nutrition International. At times when we are producing or providing micronutrients is because there are foods that do not have the right nutrients.
What are micronutrients?
Yeah, like you need to now increase, like in any food, for example, you will find some cassava, for example. If there is not the right nutrient in all that can boost the growth, be it of a person. And that's why I say that when you discuss it technically, you will understand that if the nutrients are not sufficient in a certain food and all that, there is a way that now we intervene. We can intervene whether we are doing the vitamin A supplementation, and there is also what is called now fortification of food. You go to the market now and you find that we have fortified rice, we have fortified sugar, we have fortified kind of oil, cooking oil. The aim of it is that you boost the nutrients to have the right one, so that what Latif is saying, you are not just eating flat food or any other food to fill the stomach, but you have the food that is balanced with their all nutrients. Yes.
How does then method of cooking come to play in here? Because if we're talking about, nutrient-based foods and things like this, we have some, sometimes when food is cooked within an inch of its life and then it has no nutritional value whatsoever. So does this also contribute to this mapping that you've talked about, how people cook food? Is that a contributory factor then towards malnutrition, whether it's under or poor?
Yeah, I'm happy you bringing that, because in some regions I've been in Kenya, when we have been doing demonstrations, cooking demonstrations, we enable families to understand how to cook different foods, be it sukuma wiki, which is in Kenya popular, because people cook food to death. Until there is no nutrient and all that. And you are happy to see it brown. You are happy to see it having changed. And you say that now that food is well cooked. So what we do is that enable the families to know that if you are cooking ugali, if you are cooking vegetables, this is the right way to do it. And now even in those kind of villages, we have brought in fathers who are now coming and working with their mothers. And in cultures where people feel like, Latif, you cannot be with your wife learning issues to do with cooking, people now are demystifying that. They are coming out strongly. And so I'm happy what you're bringing, that we also need to see that it is also from the table that you build the right food that you bring to your family. Yes, all the way from where you are cooking. But then I wanted to bring this, that for 30 years that Nutrition International has been in existence, the aim of it is the leading in the fight against malnutrition by ensuring this, Latif and colleagues, that and which we normally wish to tell the country, that the right nutrition at the right time is what we need. And what we also need here is to ensure that we build the capacity of people to dream. We also fuel among our people that desire for them to achieve their potential, and then to lay the foundation upon which they will build a better future. And how does it begin? Let people take responsibility of their food. We are going to the market and buying sukuma wiki and spinach because in a shine, but they are being planted in sewage places. How can we enable our people to take responsibility that they are harmful kind of lead, chemicals and others that are being ingested every other day and destroying us?
How can we, though? How can we really? For somebody, for example, who's on the side of the road, I mean, because these are the issues that we are facing on a daily basis. It's not something wrapped up in a book somewhere. This is actually it, that you're going to have vegetables, for example, sold on the side of the road. We don't have systems in place where there's food traceability in this country, or in many countries on the continent, that you can trace where this leaf of sukuma wiki started from as a seed, that you can trace what was put in the soil, what water was used to irrigate. You can't do that. So if somebody's selling 50 shillings sukuma wiki on the side of the road, and that's what somebody can afford, they will buy. They're not thinking about where did it come from, or is it harming me at the end of the day. They're thinking, what am I going to put in my belly and feed my family?
Yeah, and this comes also to regulating bodies. Our own bodies that are involved, NEMA, for example, comes in play here. That if, for example, I used to Ruai because I worked with NEMA, and we used to go to handle Ruai cases. There are people using raw sewage to farm. If the bodies in charge are not taking their part, and this is why even me as an advocate would say that the government has a responsibility. All the regulatory bodies have a responsibility. But now you come to what you are saying, that how can this poor person somewhere down there know that this is the right vegetables and this is the wrong one? And this is why we are educating and encouraging that if you are able to do that simple garden, if you are able at times to do around it, for unfortunately,
so your own kitchen garden.
Yes, unfortunately, some we are on 3rd floor, 4th floor, you don't have a garden. So you now depend on the market. And you find that in Nairobi, people now have said, okay, let me depend on food that is brought from up country, and you go to the market. You don't know at times. And it is good, for me, the first responsibility, the county governments, NEMA, and all regulatory bodies. Otherwise, we are killing populations.
You work with, sorry, go ahead, Eric.
No, ask her.
No, Eric, please go ahead. Okay. Do you also work with schools?
Yes, there are also our programs like the supplementation, I said, vitamin A, that we ensure that we are boosting actually that immunity, the strength.
No. Do you work with schools? How do you work with schools? What structure do you have to ensure that these messages are not only in schools, but is that it's disseminated to the students?
Well, I would say this, that in most of the schools, and I'm speaking not only for Kenya because I represent the region, that in places where we have, number one, let me begin from where we start, nutrition in the curriculum. That the nutrition has been embedded in the curriculum. Thereafter, we now have our officers also sensitizing, be it those teachers through the clubs. Like, for example, in Tanzania, we have the Girl Guides Association and doing a lot great work. In Kenya also, we do a lot also with the schools themselves, the teachers who are brought in some of the sessions that we undertake. Some of them are in our adolescent nutrition programs. So this is where you build them from that age.
So the Ministry of Education is a partner with whom you work?
Yes, exactly. And that's why we've influenced the curriculum change to ensure we strengthen nutrition in the curriculum. I don't know in your years if you did 4K club, for example. You are
Take a good look at me.
I think you are not, maybe Latif.
I did 4K club.
Yes.
Kuungana, kufanya, kusaidia Kenya.
Yes. And so the idea is that if we inculcate this from the early age, it will really enable our learners themselves to take responsibility.
And the president relaunched 4K club just the other day. Bringing back that, that inculcation of children learning those things about, basic agriculture, understanding food, food production, and I think it's a good initiative. I wanted to ask you, we talk about there being a crisis in Kenya and in Africa, a malnutrition crisis. For very many people, I bet you, when they hear that there's a crisis of malnutrition, they connect it to food shortage in the country. So they go, we know there are 21 counties that are facing food insecurity. So because those people are not having a square meal a day, maybe they're eating once in 2 days. So that is malnutrition, obviously. I mean, they're only taking porridge, and depending if when they do. So that's where malnutrition is. Is that the case?
And I'm happy because that is where we go wrong. Even the leaders, when you speak about nutrition, they say produce more food. Just have food. But we need to go beyond there and know that when there is a crisis, it means that the populations that are affected, especially in Africa because of conflict, displacement, and currently famine, that is affecting over about 700 million people in Africa, that there is severe malnutrition because even the aid agencies that are distributing food are not distributing that balanced food that is addressing other aspects of nutrition. So malnutrition crisis in Africa will go beyond food because there is what I mentioned to you, that some of the children have been curtailed before they reached even 2 years. 45% of deaths of under 5 children is because of undernutrition. So we cannot say it is only because of the food crisis. And so this is why now when we discuss this, we need to go beyond agriculture. And what Nutrition International is doing is bringing development across the sectors, bring agriculture, bring education, bring all ministries that are involved, let them work together. They have been working in silos. The Minister for Agriculture does not know what the health is doing. The budget for nutrition should be in health, should be in education, should be in agriculture. In Ethiopia, they have that army whereby if I am an extension worker in agriculture, I know nutrition. If you are doing this, you know it. But in Kenya, the extension worker in agriculture only stands. And so the crisis continues because we are trying to say produce more food, but there is not.
But where is the crisis? Is the crisis only in those counties that are facing starvation or hunger because of failed rainfall? Or is the crisis in also these other counties where there is sufficient food production?
Exactly. There is also in other counties. The levels may not be the same. And that is why I say that in those counties, for example, where we have poor maternal health for nutrition, the hospitals are not really providing enough services for our mothers. From the time they are going there for antenatal care all the way, you'll find their children will be affected, even that. So they have good food, but they are not accessing good nutrition services. So they are affected. But the worst are normally the vulnerable, who are the poor population in those arid and semi-arid areas, because their situation is compounded. The same way with COVID now. When COVID hit, it hit mostly the most vulnerable. It hit also those ones with the underlying conditions, diet-related. And this is why we say that if you look at the health situation caused by COVID, it affected mostly the people who have underlying conditions, malnutrition, diet-related, all these were affected. And that is where now we are saying that not only those counties that you are saying semi-arid, even in Nairobi, do you know that we have urban malnutrition, obesity? That is one here.
So obesity is a form of malnutrition.
Yes, it is. It is how many of us here have even exercise? Do we have even spaces where we run or can ride our bicycles? I know Harvey is riding, but he can be knocked any time because we do not have places.
lanes.
And in other countries, there is that provision. And look at the way even we are consuming in other countries now. The red and processed meat is reducing on the table, but in Africa is increasing. And we have a huge number, over 50% of the cases that now we are addressing of malnutrition coming to our countries in developing world. That is scary.
Do you have a partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture?
Yes, now we are Ministry of Agriculture working together in what we call nutrition sensitive programs. For example, if you see those who are now fortifying, like the indigenous, the potatoes, for example, our food, and working with USAID, for example, we work with agriculture also as Nutrition International in what I said earlier, when we are educating farmers in even growing those kind of crops around themselves, how to ensure that they are having nutritious food at home. So we work together with the ministry.
I want you to give me an example. Let's say, for instance, think of any rural area.
Yeah.
And they plant beans, they plant some vegetables, they have maize.
Yeah.
Of the things that they traditionally consume, what would constitute a balanced diet? What would constitute a balanced and nutritious diet from what people eat normally on a daily basis?
An ordinary Kenyan.
And I'm happy you have asked that, because I started, it was not before we were on air, that do we have 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day?
How many?
5 servings.
I'll explain 5 servings.
What is a serving?
So if I wish Martha is coming. If, for example, you are putting on your table, be it with a spoon, and you are saying this is vegetable, this is fruit, how many do you eat? How do you serve on your table, be it with a spoon? I move again, number 2, legumes and nuts. Do you have them on your table, for example? Do you eat that? And that can be availed even in our communities.
I think CT is one of legumes.
These are the legumes.
He stopped at legumes.
Mung'ou ya kuku.
No. Sio mguu ya kuku. Anyway, whether the family, whether beans, whether all that. Okay. So when you have the proteins, when you have all that you learned in school, carbohydrates. No, we didn't.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Soup.
So what I can say here is that, do you know that it is possible, because you asked from the traditional village there, because this mom or what can have in the farm vegetables, can have fruit at least, even if possible there, can have beans, if not beans, what we're calling minjis and the rest, and would ensure that is on the table. And there are also others who would have the milk from their home there and the rest. And so the person is interplaying. And we say about meat, and I started here saying that 1 serving of red meat a week. I know that there are people who eat meat daily, even twice a day. It is partly actually given that it is contributing to these non-communicable diseases. The more we have these, and sugary drinks, sugary food, and all that, these all leading
processed, in other words.
Processed.
But let me ask you this question. I mean, it's interesting you should mention that.
Yes.
Because why I give the example of a traditional community, that most of what they eat, they plant, they didn't buy.
Yeah.
Nowadays, people buy because a lot of the farming, if you're talking about the current generation, many of them have no affinity to farming or land. Okay, but if I look at where I came from, where I come from, ordinarily there was some form of fish.
That is correct.
At any point in time, dried, and a variety of them at any given point. These things you talk about, legumes, they were in the farm.
Yes.
Vegetables were not bought. When people wanted to cook, you were told to go to the patch and tune some vegetables and bring it for cooking. Yes, it was later on when I was older, I realized people actually buy these things. Okay. Now, again, all that would comprise about, because you didn't eat one thing.
Yes, that's correct.
You ate the vegetables, you ate whatever protein,
Some
protein, and the ugali was a constant.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But the ugali wasn't just maize. It was mixed with barley, sometimes it was mixed with cassava. So now, why I'm asking this is, many people who lived and ate the traditional diet, many of them lived to a very ripe old age. And these non-communicable diseases are things people talk about and they wonder what on earth they're talking about.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
Again, there are communities that are essentially carnivorous. They eat more meat than any of us even think.
And they still lived very long.
Yes, and you don't
Eating
hear
red meat.
Yes, and you don't hear of them
Titus.
having problems with. So, is the meat the problem, or is it what the cows eat that is a problem?
Latif, you
Respond to this after this break.
Okay.
It's 26 minutes to 8. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. Titus Mung'ou is a regional nutritional advocate from Nutrition International. We are talking about what they're calling a malnutrition crisis in Africa and Kenya, and we want to understand, so what exactly is malnutrition? How is it a crisis? How is it manifesting itself in the country, and how can we address it?
This is the Situation Room.
With us in the studio this morning is Titus Mung'ou, regional nutrition advocate at Nutrition International. We're talking about malnutrition. It's a crisis in Kenya and in Africa, and he'll tell us why shortly. Before we took the break, you're responding to CT's question.
Yes.
Looking at the ordinary plates on Kenyan tables, all right? So traditionally, yes, there was a lot of access to all these foods. Nowadays, if you ask anybody who will go for lunch today, they'll tell you, okay, so I've had some starch, either ugali or chapati, and then there'll be some meat, whether it's going to be fish, chicken, beef, mutton, for those ones who are a bit up there. Mutton has become a... And then there's going to be some mboga. Unataka mboga gani? Ya kienyeji ama sukuma? It's going to be kunde, osuga, sukuma wiki, spinach, and that's it. Is that a proper nutritious?
I need to start from where you mentioned that they lived longer, our old men or parents, and they did not have really to struggle as we are doing now, because they planted from out there, they picked some fruits from even the bush, they did all that before. But what has happened is that we have a bit changed in our lifestyle. And at times when I find chips, pasta, and pizzas to be the only meal that looks, actually we say it is about, people see the color and the taste, and they say that is good food. But when you look at our traditional foods, you see that is boring. When President Museveni told Ugandans that if there is no bread, eat cassava, what did people feel? What is he
Not
saying?
being insulted.
He insulted. But you would find that that is a meal that you love. And you post something. They ate meat, even those old people, but did not have a problem. I do not want to really say that how regular was it a problem to them. Some people exercised, they worked, they walked and all that. But we are eating and you are sitting on your table. You sit here, you are in the office, you are not exercising. You go there, you use the lift elevator every time into your car, home, you do not do anything. And therefore, what is happening is that you're just increasing the mass, the fat and all that body. End of it all is affecting. Then the last one maybe is that we also have increased production, fast production of foods because of certain types of chemicals and fertilizer that we need also to regulate. Do you know that we have even chicken that can be reared within a week or two, and we are throwing on the table?
A week.
So you have
The crackling chicken.
you know
crackling chicken.
and you go out there and you have potatoes, the waru, which are huge. You say, give me that big one. But you do not know what really that constitutes. This is why we are calling that we have really to be responsible and regulate the way we are eating. And so partly we are affected by some of these innovations that are pushing us to the tilt and adding more kind of harm to us. But that is not our mandate as Nutrition International more. As I said, our large mandate now, as we are discussing with the governments to push them to invest more in nutrition, to have more funds, which we can speak. There is not hardly budgets for nutrition in our countries.
What's
Beyond
our
the
budget for
funding.
nutrition? Sorry. What's our budget for nutrition in this country? How much do we
First of all,
put?
do we have a budget for nutrition in this
In
country?
fact, I'm happy. You need a spotlight to find where it is. in some of the ministries, because the problem here is that our legislators, some of them now are nutrition champions. We have trained some, we have built capacity. They need to go to parliament and advocate more. And Tanzania has reached almost that level now, whereby the budget for nutrition is strengthened. For Kenya, if Martha was to explain here, we have now counties, Nandi, Makueni, Vihiga, and all these that have joined now to have a clear budget for nutrition working with us. What we've done, we've told them, you put this million, will equal the amount. And they are now doing that.
Okay.
And ending up now increasing. But what they call budget for nutrition in some countries is actually for salaries.
So how does this play out? I'm curious to know. Because, okay, sure, because some would say, okay, well, hire extension officers, for example, so that you can have this symbiotic relationship between ministries, agriculture, health, etc. But how does it play out? And a very vivid picture is in my mind. It may sound elitist, but I remember when Michelle Obama, at the time of her husband's presidency, did this nationwide tour to schools to advocate for healthier school lunches, because in the public system, the school obviously provides the food on a daily. So she went and basically was going round and round and saying, change the food, how these children are eating, and you will see a drastic change in how they are learning. So and it was clear, this is what happens. She was going and advocating, and actually they went to the point where they changed the fats, the oils that were used. They changed and included vegetables. They removed the sugary drinks and put natural juices. So that is an example. I'm asking, how do we see it playing out here? If we are saying, switch up this nutrition, what are we doing? Are we talking to farmers? Are we talking to people who run households? Are we talking to the service industry? How does it play out for us to see that we're actually trying to get a change in the way nutrition is addressed?
I'm happy, now you speak advocacy. And this is where I say that if we have failed to do good advocacy. But what we're doing is this. Change begins by having these champions, including the media. Do you know that we have now over like 20 or so journalists who are nutrition champions? For if we do not take the message, the politician will ignore. And another change, Latif, also is that in Zambia, for example, people interrogate the manifestos before elections. Do you have nutrition targets? Like now we are going to elections. I've not seen the manifestos. But are our parties going to have that in their manifesto, and we ensure that we address that? How do we change again, as Miss Obama did? We need champions at the high level, including politicians, because in some countries the presidents themselves have taken up the role and they are calling themselves a nutrition champion, like King Letsi of Lesotho. And when he speaks, his people hear that. But when nutrition is not brought out, the mama mboga down there, someone does not really follow and say, is it really serious? Until we make nutrition, because by the way, development is impeded by malnutrition. It affects a gross 2 to 16% of GDP loss because of malnutrition in our countries. That is huge.
A prickly question though, Titus.
Yes.
Can you have this nutrition conversation implemented if you do not have prerequisite structures in place? Follow me here.
Yes.
If you're talking to a farmer who is using raw sewage to water their crop, in some cases, I'm careful about this, they may not have a choice. Why? Because they don't have access to water. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So where is the conversation here? Does there need to be more of an attention paid to the implementation of proper structures before you can now start having this conversation? Whether you're talking about health, whether you're talking about the provision of water, whether you're talking about access ways, whether you're talking about proper road network. Do you need to have all of those things in place before you can start having the conversation, or is it things that can now work all at the same time?
They can work at the same time, but where we begin is this. We are supporting countries. We are supporting even county governments. First of all, to have in place costed nutrition plans. If you do not plan in Kenya now, whereby the counties have called county integrated plans, then you lose it. That is the structure, number one. And also policies in Kenya. Do you have food security and nutrition policy in place. That now places you where the ministry says, if the policy does not say, how do I invest? If this does not say, how do I put money? So we began from there. Then now we move the conversation, as you are saying, to what we now say, accountability of the government and those responsible to implement those policies. Otherwise, the structure itself loses. There is no foundation if you do not embed it in the policies and plans. Every year, do we interrogate our governments to say, did you budget for nutrition? Did you plan for nutrition? The last one now, conversation to the common person down there. We are using informal ways of meetings. We are using the media. We are using also their public kind of meetings. And we have chosen nutrition champions in the community. Some of them are youth, some of them are leaders, and they are now taking the message to their own people. And do you know that there is fish in some parts of central Kenya to eastern, but people are saying this is a snake. They would not, they do farming, fish farming, but they sell it. But yet,
not for local consumption.
Not for local, because the culture and everything, this is a snake.
Tell me, the work you do is actually international work.
Yes.
How do you partner with the AU?
Thank you very much. That one thing that we realized that in Africa that is carrying the burden of malnutrition globally, the over 60 million people malnourished are in Africa out of the 150 million in the world now, standard children. What happens is that the AU for the first time now is coming strongly to have a nutrition kind of like a department to push, and then Nutrition International recently signed a memorandum of understanding with the AU so that we support the AU to integrate nutrition when responding to situations like floods in South Africa, responding to famine in the Sahel region, when coming to address agriculture. And now we have the presidents of Africa, some of them sitting to drive the agenda. What we want to do is that ensure that if we speak from the AU voice, for example, AU level, some of the heads of states will hear. We've tried it from the bottom situation of talking to the counties and the rest, but we also need AU to talk to member states, because when they come to meetings like United Nations, AU should be accountable and say, Africa is driving the nutrition agenda this way.
Let me ask you a question that may sound a little difficult, but do people listen to what the AU has to say?
Well, one thing is that it can be said that they don't listen, but the presidents and health ministers meet every year for this, that there are targets they are given.
Or has the AU's voice been loud enough previously in other matters to then warrant that should they say something concerning nutrition, that folks are likely to sit up and take notice?
I would agree that the voice has not been loud enough, but now this is where we have come in. We want to ensure that they have the necessary, be it empowerment, be it capacity kind of, to ensure that they speak loudly on that. Because most of it, we would say very well that if, for example, Kikwete recently said that Africa is losing these millions. You have heads of states there. When he was the head of state, nutrition also was pushed up there to the prime minister's office. The same way to Malawi, when Joyce Banda was also the head of state, nutrition was in the office of the president. And that is when they achieved a lot. In Malawi, in Tanzania, and some other countries. Only 8 countries actually in Africa are on course to achieve some of the nutrition targets.
And what are these targets?
They can be targets of reducing what we call acute malnutrition stunting, the wasting, whether the thin child, the underweight, obesity, anemia, which is affecting women of reproductive age, 15 to 49 years. Most of our children are affected because of anemic kind of situation their parents have been in. So we are not on course in achieving all these, including NCDs. Those are also targets that the countries have been given in the World Health Assembly, as well as Sustainable Development Goals. And then now we have Malabo Declaration for AU. This is now where we said, bring stunting down to 10% in and also improve agriculture. Some of them are not achieving. So what AU has done, they have created what they call the Africa Leaders for Nutrition, ALN, whereby they have now a scorecard. Countries now are undergoing that, evaluated against those targets.
You know, as you speak throughout this show, I've had several pickup lines. For example, right nutrition at the right time.
Yes.
You've said it's also important to check the nutrients and the amount of nutrients in whatever food that we are eating. So sometimes we may be eating, but then does it have the right amount of nutrients? Takes me to a conversation where I'm wondering, does Nutrition International advocate for genetically modified foods?
Well, this is not in our mandate. And my colleague, I remember if we discussed it again on another show here in the media, that we know that there are scientific kind of evidence that food production has been boosted through GMO. There are other cases where there are harmful kind of foods produced, but we do not, that's not our forte for now. That's not in our area. And I'm happy you are asking this, because the Ministry of Agriculture now comes in here and ensures that proper production of food is in the country. And we desist if there are any practices that will injure, harm the populations, then they should not be allowed. And so I would not answer in depth, because it is not our arena.
So from where you sit as Nutrition International, let's say that one of you at Nutrition International became the head of state in Kenya.
Yes.
Where would you prioritize to make sure that then nutrition and those goals are achieved? What is it that needs to happen, and what would you do?
Assuming today, for example, my country director was the president, the first one that we would say is that what you mentioned, where is the seat that coordinates the nutrition structures? And what I would do, number one, is that place it in that office of the president. And this is what the scaling up movement globally is saying. Let nutrition be elevated at the highest level. Once it is at the highest level, you are able now to integrate nutrition across all the departments, across all the ministries. That for me will be the call.
So the number one thing is set up like a state department for nutrition.
Actually, like for example, in Ethiopia, they are setting what they call Nutrition Council, and at the highest level. And so we expect Kenya also, they have what we call the multi-stakeholder forum for nutrition, but elevate it. Actually, it is in one of the policies that was in the food security policy and nutrition, but it has not been implemented. And it was recommended that it be placed in the office of the president.
What would you do?
When it is there?
Yes.
You know, one thing is that the same way you do, strategically for me as an advocate, is that you are able to control or allocate the right resources. You are able to, resources meaning not only funds, but people. You are able also now to require from all those departments account. Do they come and sit in the cabinet and report to the president the way they have handled nutrition in the country? And that is what, like now what is happening, nutrition funds are being diverted to address the current economic crisis and COVID crisis. Until now, they are depleted. Some of the counties have reported all the money that was for nutrition has been moved to others. That person, when you elevate, will not allow, because nutrition is the cornerstone of development.
When that money is available,
yes,
the money that you're saying in this country, there's some money for nutrition. What exactly does it do?
I started earlier that what we are trying to handle in some counties, that the money that was only allocated was for staff, like you have a nutritionist, you have a whatever, but now to do more for programs. In Kenya, almost 80 or 70% of nutrition programs are supported by donors. And so the other amount from the government would go mainly to management of kind of the structures that we have. And so that is why we are now discussing with the counties. Since the time counties started, they are increasing the money for programs. And we are happy to see that happening now. And we wish that all counties did that.
But Titus, the question that always arises when it comes to matters of donor funding is, yes, the funds are given, yes, there are programs, but do we see these monies actually achieving what was purposed?
Well, if you have to take it, can be individual accountability, because for me in nutrition sector, where the development world is shouldering almost 80% of the programs, I can say that we today would not be in the situation if those funds were not there. 2 million children will not achieve their potential. If those funds were not there, they would be double, triple.
Yes. Now, the other aspect of what I'm saying is, So long as there's donor funding, there are those who also argue, then the government has no incentive to actually take over and ensure that this is the burden that they carry. That the overdependence on donor funding simply cripples the government.
And I'm happy you come there, because we have proven to the government that this funding that we are talking of, 70 maybe shouldering, is a paltry. There are many unmet nutrition needs because the donor funds, for example, now they have been diverted to Ukraine and Russia. They are not, some of them have curtailed, reduced their funding coming to our countries because of the crisis. The other time it was crisis, a global one. So even that amount that donors are funding, do you know that it is not achieving a quarter of what we need to address in malnutrition in Kenya, which is why we are now doing what we need domestic resource mobilizing, domestic resources from the country. Ethiopia started that in what they call Sekota Declaration. Invest money from the country also. Let the country put money to solve its problems.
We need to be our own
Yes.
solution.
Build capacity, local capacity, take charge of yourself.
And do everything.
And lead. Yeah.
Titus, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
And for talking about nutrition. Come again and we keep talking about this nutrition. Titus Mung'ou is a regional nutrition advocate, works for Nutrition International. He's been here. We'll be talking about the malnutrition crisis in Africa and Kenya.